Today we celebrate the Feast of the Transfiguration. I really don't like this feast. I have my preferences. But the reason is it seems too much of a fantastic thing. But then really, if you think about it, we have a lot of fantasies in our life, in our world. Indiana Jones, In Search of the Holy Grail, and James Bond, and these very fantastic things happen, unbelievable things. Some of you might be old enough to remember Star Trek and that famous phrase, "Beam me up, Scotty." Except you never said that. So in our story this morning, the gospel, we have Jesus is on the mountain with his friends, 3 of his friends, and he suddenly becomes full of white light, brighter than anything. And his friends, the disciples, hide themselves. They're fearful. And Jesus says to them, "Do not be afraid." And Peter says, "Well, we'll fix this. Let us build dwellings." Now, dwellings were not houses. What he was talking about were booths. In fact, in the Jewish tradition, this is called the Feast of the Booths. They're more like little shrines that Peter wanted to build. But Jesus said no. The divine proclamations that we have in Epiphany, they're bookended by the Transfiguration. We have them, the Transfiguration at the beginning and then at the end. But the divine proclamations of the season of Epiphany call our attention to Jesus as God made flesh. Ours is a God that is transcendent and yet immanent, set apart, yet ever drawing near, fantastic, and yet extremely real. God is in every encounter with another human being. God is in every person. So when we recognize that, when we see it the way the disciples did, then we see the light and we understand that God is with us. Now, we do have difficulty in our society, and I'm going to tell you a story from the news of this week. Sometimes we have trouble seeing reality and we see something that isn't true. We get confused. Now, I don't know how many of you heard the story of the Lyft driver this week who was accused of abducting a woman and taking her north to New Hampshire. I remember hearing that when they were announcing, oh my goodness, there's an abduction. It wasn't an Amber Alert yet. So I thought to myself, with my prejudice, oh well, these Lyft and Uber, they're dangerous companies because you don't know what you're doing when you get into a car. Well, it turned out that the Lyft driver was Haitian and did not speak English very clearly, but the rider wasn't listening very clearly either. And she thought when she got into the car, she first got into the wrong car, and then the driver was going to pick up another passenger before he dropped off this person. And so he wasn't abducting anyone. He was doing what he thought was right. But the perception was, oh no, this is a stranger and I've put myself in danger. And that's what happens to us when the reality is blurred by our own prejudice. So the woman who was the driver was clearly afraid and didn't need to be. Now I have a story on the other side of this about an Uber driver. And this story I heard just this week from a friend of mine who was in New York City. And she was taking the train back to Boston, and she hopped into the Uber car to get to the train station in New York City, which, you know, I'm always afraid in New York City. But she was feeling very confident because she had her phone and her train ticket was on her phone, and she got the Uber from her phone, and everything was going very well, and she was happy. And she gets to the train station and she goes to show her ticket, which is on her phone, and she can't find her phone. So fortunately she gets on the train because they have an electronic record that she had indeed bought a ticket. So she's on the train now, and she doesn't have her phone. She can't call anybody to say, hey, help, I don't have my phone. She knows that attached to her phone in a little envelope is her debit card and her credit card and her license. So as she's riding the train for hours, her mind is going over and over the tragedy that has just happened to her. And she realizes that she probably left her phone in the Uber car. All right, so you leave your phone in a public place, you really can't expect to get it back. So she got home, she got on her iPad and was able to do the find your phone, and she could see that indeed her phone was in the Uber car going around New York City. But it was a holiday weekend, so there was nobody that she could actually call to say, hey, help. I mean, meaning the Uber company. So on Tuesday morning, so this happened on Friday. On Tuesday morning, she finally gets to inform Uber what happened. She gets from Uber the name and phone number of the driver. She calls him up, and within one day, this Uber driver had put that phone and all the papers in an envelope and had it overnighted to her, and she received her phone. Then the Uber driver sent her a message saying, you don't need to pay for it, the sending of it, because the company paid for it. So what do we do with a story like that? What I want to do with that story is say, we can never predict. We can't predict whether we're going to have a disaster or something good happen. But when something good happens, we need to recognize, to see, like the Epiphany, that God is present. Okay, it's not magical, it's not fantastic, it's not Star Trek, it's ordinary. But God is ordinary, in us, with us, helping us all along the way. When I was a kid, we learned in school that God is everywhere. I remember as a 6-year-old thinking, really? And then one day, not too long ago, I found a magnet that I have on my refrigerator that says, Jesus is coming, look busy. You know what? God is everywhere. Not just to check on us like the elf on the shelf. My grandchildren, oh, you know. I love it actually, to Elf on the Shelf, because you can say to the kids, oh, if you don't do as I say, The elf on the shelf is watching you. No, God isn't like that. God is in you and in every person you encounter, whether we see it or not. And every person you encounter is an opportunity to make God known, or to see the light that sparkles from that person and from the miracles that happen to us. Instead of standing idle and waiting for God to be revealed to us in some extraordinary way, we are called to get up every day and look for Jesus' presence in our ordinary lives. Recognizing God at work in ordinary life can be difficult, especially when we face setbacks, sorrow, or any general annoyance. But rest assured, God is there. And that brings us to our knees to thank God. Today we are reminded in this passage, in this gospel, to seek God's light in each other, and especially through the darkness we encounter every day. Amen.